Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Derek. Today's topic of discussion is just going to be about 5 common relationships mistakes. These are not necessarily the most common, but they are things that do exist. And while a relationship can continue while these things have happened, the relationship is doomed to fail. So what I'd like to do is just kind of give you roughly about 5 and just kind of let you know exactly what's happening, why these things take place. These are things that you want to avoid, especially if you're looking for a new relationship or you're getting into a relationship. These are things that you have to really understand. And this is something that a lot of people do. They don't necessarily realize they're doing it, but it is something that I see. I see it a lot, even in situations where I'm out meeting other women. It just, you can see it. It comes out when you listen to them. Like when I'm listening to a girl talk. There's a lot of things that I'm picking up on, and there's things that I definitely want to avoid when it comes to the kinds of relationships that I want to be involved in. So they're not really in any particular order. Like I said, they're not necessarily the most 5 common, but they are things that are, that are present in most relationships, especially when they're unhealthy. And it's usually what leads to, it just becomes a further problem later on down the line. So let's just get into it. The first one is fantasy-based expectations. Now, I'll start off talking first about people who aren't necessarily in relationships and their kind of ideas about what relationships should be. And when normally you're dealing with a lot of insecure people, and their mentality is to think and create in their head the ideal situation that works best for them. And the problem with this is that what they do is they create a very self-serving mindset and fantasy based on what would work best for them, what they feel would work best for them. And what they don't necessarily do is they don't necessarily consider the everyday dealings that people have and the interactions that people have with each other. So as an example, a lot of people don't, when they start dating someone, they don't think about the fact that, well, this person's attractive, so they're going to obviously get some sort of attention outside of their relationship. And this is something that people don't necessarily consider. And when these things happen, people can get jealous. And so what can happen is when somebody creates an ideal relationship in their head, and they're the ones giving voice and reason to everything that individual that they're fantasizing does and says. When a situation like that arises, the person still gets insecure because they never really considered the fact that these things just happen. And part of the problem with that too is they're never really paying attention to the person that they're getting involved with. They're just looking for that, is that person attracted to me? And it almost kind of gives off the vibe that what that individual is doing when they do meet somebody is that they're actually kind of living up to those expectations. So one of the things that you have to be aware of is that when you're meeting people for the first time, and irregardless of what you're wanting from them or the attraction you have for them, is you have to understand that nobody can ever live up to any fantasy. And you shouldn't put those expectations that somebody has to be bending themselves or being something to adapt to you. The big thing is you want to understand is that if you're not happy, then that's something that you have to work on. That's something that you have to understand. It's a very internal thing that has to be fixed. And there are lots of YouTube videos and lots of people who can help with that. Which brings me to the next point, which is number 2. My partner is supposed to make me completely happy. This again ties into the first one with unrealistic expectations. And just as an example, what I want to do is just talk about a scenario where you can't put that kind of expectation on someone to make you happy. The first thing is there's not one single person in this world that is ever going to make you happy. That's why we have friends. That's why we have other relationships. That's why we have hobbies and activities with other people outside of a romantic relationship, is because you fulfill yourself with all these other things, right? It isn't just one aspect. There's no way that you could quit doing all the things you like to do and disregard all your friends for the rest of your life and expect to ever be in a relationship, even if you're with someone who's absolutely wonderful, that they're going to fulfill you with such positivity that you're going to always be happy. We need other things, right? So we can't put so much pressure on one person to make us happy. Number two, what I want to do is bring about the fact that, let's just say that you are in a relationship and you've had a really crummy day. We all have our own things that we have to deal with outside of our relationship. So maybe you come home and you're in a bad mood and you want your partner to fix it or to make it better or to make you feel better. But yet at the same time, your partner comes home and has had just as bad a day as you've had. So something's got to give, right? Now, if he doesn't or she doesn't make you happy in that moment, is it because she's had a bad day or is it because she doesn't care? And this is, I think, a struggle for a lot of people because they have this expectation that that's what you're supposed to live for. Somebody is supposed to live so wholeheartedly for me all day, every day. Think about me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and make sure that they always know that I'm happy. And that's impossible because when you think about it, even yourself, you spend a lot of your time during the day thinking about other things, dealing with other things, and it's just impossible for anybody to put everything about their life aside just to make sure that you're happy. Number three is creating unrealistic expectations. This is kind of a double-edged sword. It does kind of go back to my first point. However, what people do when they can start getting together, especially when they're insecure, is they will tend to portray themselves as being better than they actually are. So what that means is they might say that they're honest, but there's certain situations and things that they do in their life where, there might be a situation where they have a friend who's not being that honest, but they won't be honest with their friend for fear of getting yelled at or having that person's opinion lowered of you. So what can happen is when you get into a new relationship, you want to put your best foot forward, but what a lot of people do is they put a illusion forward. And that is they create this illusion that I'm a good person, I'm trustworthy, I'm respectful. But as the relationship progresses, what starts to happen is when those insecurities start to come in and those fears start to come in, that's the reality, and the fantasy starts to disappear. And the problem is that people cling more to what they've been told somebody is rather than paying attention to that person, who that person actually is. So last thing you want to be doing is ever creating this idea that until you are understanding of what it means to be absolutely honest and respectful and trustworthy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in any situation, irregardless of what is going on in your life or who you're dealing with, that we don't want to create unrealistic expectations, because what happens is after the first 90 days of most relationships, when those insecurities, we start to reveal who we really are. Now, you can either build up an idea of who you are and then maintain that through the relationship, or you build up an illusion and unrealistic expectations for your partner where you say, I'm this kind of person. I'm the kind of person who will text you every day and listen to all your problems and tell you how special and wonderful you are. And then all of a sudden, that 90 days goes by, and all of a sudden there almost seems to be like a distance, and you're not communicating as often, and you're not as responsive, and you're not spending as much time together, and you're taking breaks, and this can be confusing to people because they don't really understand why all of a sudden you're 900 miles an hour in your first 3 months, and then all of a sudden it's like you've just pulled back, and the other person wonders what's wrong, and that's because you created a level of unrealistic expectations about yourself to that other person. Which brings me to the next point, is the lack of honesty. And this is a difficult subject because there's a lot of people think honesty is just, oh, I'll tell someone the truth, or I'll tell them the truth somewhere down the line, but eventually I'll be truthful. And what a lot of people don't understand is that even your actions can dictate a lack of honesty. And as I mentioned before, let's say there's a situation where you have a friend who's they're complaining about their relationship, but yet you know that they flirt or cheat or whatever, and you don't tell that person that what they're doing is wrong, and you avoid conflict with that person. You have to understand that that's a lack of honesty. You also have to understand that when you try to present yourself to someone as being an honest person, if you have a situation like that in your life, then the reality is you're not as honest as you think you are. And the whole point is you want to be honest and trustworthy and respectful, because that's really how you want to be perceived. That's how you want people to look at you. I want that person to know that I'm honest. I want that person to always know without a doubt, whether I'm with them or not, that they know by my actions and by my words that everything that I said and everything that I do lives up to those, right? It's even. It's not one, I'm saying this, but I'm over here doing this. No. If I'm saying this, then I'm doing this. And so this is something that I think a lot of people don't do, which again creates that level of unrealistic expectations, because you tell someone you're honest, but then you'll find yourself in situations where you sacrifice being honest to save face, or to avoid arguments, or to avoid someone having a bad opinion of you. And the last thing is, and this generally happens as the relationship progresses, is kind of like what is known as scorekeeping. And what happens, and it's a combination of all of these things. So you got fantasy expectations, you got this idea that somebody is supposed to make you happy completely, and it's their job, and if they fail, that's a problem. And the creation of unrealistic expectations that you bring onto yourself, and the lack of honesty. What this does, it brings about these altercations between two individuals where they're not understanding why what they spent the first 90 days of relationship building, these ideas that, oh, I'm a good person, well, so am I. And then what happens is when the disappointment happens because of those unrealistic expectations, and we can't live up to what somebody thinks, we can't live up to what somebody says is what's going to make them happy. What happens is you start getting into this scorekeeping, and you start getting into these conflicts where you're like, oh yeah, well, you did this. Oh yeah, well, I only did that because you did that. And so you start getting into this scorekeeping scenario, which builds up a lot of resentment, which eventually becomes the very thing that actually rips the relationship apart. People just get so fed up with one another because they never really got down to the nitty-gritty of what it means to be in the healthiest of relationships. So I hope this was helpful for you guys. I hope this enlightened some of you. I'm going to be doing more videos where we talk more about how to deal and overcome those things, and what it really means, again, to be more honest and respectful and trustworthy. So if you have any comments or questions, please leave them down below. If you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you guys are doing that. And leave any comments about anything. If you have any questions, just leave them down below, and I'll do my best to make videos about them, and any particular subjects that you guys have in mind. And so on that note, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.